think sometimes as psychology.
I think advice of the pastor as one of many was a God experience. Wanted to find God, simply feeling like you're in fire.
So tell us about the solution.
As one
People
of many
18 to 35 years of age out of work. Hey, I don't have the skill for this particular problem to solve this particular problem.
None of us talked about the bread salad.
The hospital was in Louth, and it was a cubicle. And everyone in the reception could hear everything. It was like a rape. It was like I was being stripped bare. He was the one that gave me, Madam, 20 milligram of Serosant. I got home, and 40 milligrams, he said. I got home, I took 40 milligrams. And I had a spasm. I had suicide thoughts. I went really, really crazy about 3 a.m. Woke my husband, and we called the doctor. The first thing he said is that, Madam, do you know what time it is? Do you know what time it is? And my husband said, well, sorry, but this is the lady you saw earlier. And he said, oh, the magazine publisher. My husband said, yes. He said, so what's the problem? He said, she's reacting to the medicine. And he said, how many milligrams did she take? He said, 40. As he said, oh, she should have started on 20 milligrams. She'll be fine. Tomorrow, let us go on 20 milligrams instead of 40. He really didn't feel responsible for the pain.
Welcome to the Heart of the Matter, where we continue our discussion with Mrs. Betty Irabor. She is the publisher of one of the foremost lifestyle magazine in Nigeria, and I believe indeed in Africa. And she's here having written a book called Dust to Dew. We've talked with her extensively about it. Dust to Dew is the story of the time of dust in her life, a dark time. And you know what dust is like. Dust settles in your eyes, dust obscures your vision, and so on and so forth. And dew speaks of refreshing, a fresh, a bright new day. We've talked about the times when she went through insomnia, and trying to get a solution to insomnia took her through lots of medical practitioners, and nobody seemed to understand, nobody seemed to empathize. People felt, hey, look, you're a successful woman. You shouldn't have this problem. Just power up, as you said. But during her journey, she eventually found people that, a couple of doctors at least, who empathized with her, one of them in Dubai, and then back home, after she had become immune to consulting doctors, she met a doctor who was listening and who has actually been a large contributor to her path today. So we're going to take off from that angle of her story. What has it been like? Having met this doctor, she's helped you identify triggers and so on. And triggers go back to family, grief, and so on and so forth. Over to you.
She was able to pull me out, to draw me out, and things that I didn't think had any relationship to what she was asking. But she was curious. She wanted to know everything, especially why it lingered for 7 years. She was very curious, and she asked me about my childhood. And when I told her about losing my brother, she understood that because I was coming out of depression when my brother died, so I just relapsed. And a few days after my brother died, I was sitting before her, completely shattered, and she knew a lot about psychoanalysis, psychotherapy, and I think things that I didn't realize were a burden, I started talking about it. I opened up. And you can't help people when they don't want to be helped. And I opened up to her. We used both talk therapy as well as medication. And she also realized that I had been pumped with so many medications that were now fighting one another in my system. And then she realized some of them, and she would give me a medication and tell me what to expect. So I didn't have a shock like, oh my God, like I did the couple of times when I was on overdose. And I began gradually to also speak to myself that, look, Betty, she may be good at what she's doing, but you also have to contribute towards the journey to healing. So she helped me to find myself. It wasn't overnight. We still had like 18 months. But gradually, I began to have a reason to live again.
Now, suicide.
Yeah.
I know you've mentioned it in our discussion so far, but there may be somebody on the viewing this program who has thoughts of suicide, and not just, I guess if we're honest, everybody maybe at one time or the other just has a flash of thought. Yeah. But then there are people that really, it's just the opportunity to do it and they will do it. And it's not, how can that be prevented?
The times I attempted suicide, I was not in control. I didn't know what was going on. It just seemed like, how do I deal with this pain? And I felt, if I'm not alive, if I can't feel, then the pain will go away. So one particular morning, I wanted my husband to go to church because the voice kept saying to me, you need to take your life. You're no good. You're a failure. You amount to nothing. Take your life. And it was a Sunday morning. I had stopped going to church for about 8 months, so my husband would go to church alone. So I was waiting for him to go to church, and I was pottering about the place, like waiting for him to go into the bathroom. He didn't. So in frustration, I ran to my dressing table and took my antidepressant and ran into the bathroom. It was just in time to catch that. When you're in that place, when there seemed to be no answer, there seemed to be like you're not going to come out of this darkness, this tunnel, and you are digging deeper. And in digging deeper, you're drowning. Everybody gets that thought, like, should I? That's why someone is driving on Third Mainland Bridge and is having this thing going on in his head. Like, if I just jump into this water, all my problems will go. All my pain will go. So right there, it's not about being rational. It's not about...
You don't even think, I've got
no.
X number of children, I've got a husband, all these people
right
missed
there, you even feel like you'll be doing them. Yes, that, why are you putting them through this pain? Mm-hmm. So with that voice ringing and telling me everything, I obeyed. I didn't stop to think that I'm a successful woman. I have so much to be grateful for. Children who are excelling, a career that's going places, a husband that dotes on me. I didn't think of that. But when I was coming out of it and I would hear that voice, I would say, you lie. Mm-hmm. I remember one particular time I had this overwhelming voice coming again, and I just started speaking like, no, you lie. I'm a successful woman. I have this business. I'm a career woman. I started the Genevieve Ping Ball. I started the conversation on breast cancer. I am a pioneer publisher. I have done this. My children, I've been married several number of years. I'm a beautiful woman. I started talking back frantically. And I realized that I drowned that voice.
Okay, so for the viewer that's watching
Yeah.
And gets into that same sort of place,
Yes.
It's not the people around them.
No.
They've got to just remember that voice must be drowned.
Yes, it's in your head. And no one taught me, no therapist said to me, oh, talk back. But I was so irritated. I was so angry that, hey, I've had enough. So I started like, no, I'm going to tell you I am not a failure. Whereas in the past, I just soaked it in. And then I went under the duvet. And then I started working consciously. Where I wanted to wear a black dress to match my depressive state, I would put on a pink dress.
Now, this is something that is just occurring to me. Yeah. When you are in that, in the depths of depression, the suicide thoughts were coming, yeah. And what you didn't feel you had anybody to turn to, okay? because nobody would understand. And then these feelings of low self-esteem, failure. And you see, for those who know you, know that it isn't true and would think it is just irrational for you to be thinking
that you're worthless.
Yeah, that you're worthless.
Yeah. People used to think that depression was caused a lot by poverty and also failure. But then if we look at some of the people recently who had committed suicide, if we look at Anthony Bourdain and we look at Kate Spade, we look at the cardiologist from South Africa, and then we look at the ordinary person who actually failed. I was speaking to a young girl and she said, that some of them have to repeat and some of them fail their exams and some of them failed in a relationship. Someone had dumped them. So the first thing that comes to mind is suicide. You're not thinking about your achievements or you're not looking at that this is a temporary setback. All you see is just a failure. All you see is that you will amount to nothing. There is no reason to live. But the moment I started, okay, let me talk back at this voice. And I found that it was working. Yeah. I started intensifying it. And then I went back to God, whom I had put in a compartment. Don't talk to me. You can't be God. And I'll go through this 7 years battle. And
but he was in it with you.
He was in the storm. Mm-hmm. But then I wanted a quick fix it. If I pray that God, I'm not sleeping, and I read all the passages my mom sent to me, so he gives his beloved sweet sleep. He has not given me a spirit of timidity, but of love, of courage, and a sound mind. And I was without a sound mind. I'd read Isaiah 43, you coming through the waters, it will not drown you. And why am I still on the same spot? So God, you stay on your lane, I stay on my lane. So I wasn't going to church, I wasn't reading the Bible, and I wasn't praying.
So what you're saying is it's very important that everyone who has depression or insomnia gets an intervention. And we'll talk about that because in our society today, the kind of intervention that may be necessary is something that people have, people feel stigmatizes them. So we're going to take a short break. Viewers, stay tuned. We'll be back talking about this very important subject with Betty Irabor. Welcome back to The Heart of the Matter, where we're talking to Betty Irabor about her book, Dust to Dew. And one of the things that is a problem in our nation is the fact that people stigmatize mental illnesses with madness. And so for that reason, a lot of people are hesitant to go and seek an intervention. And can you tell us why it's so important?
Initially, when I went into depression, and every time the GP said to me that I will get you to see a psychiatrist, immediately something inside of me will just clam up like, psychiatrist? Has it come to that? Because we live in a nation where the term psychiatrist is associated with mad people, crazy people. So initially, I felt very reluctant when my uncle had said to me, I want you to see a psychiatrist. I felt, no, I don't need to see a psychiatrist. So imagine me, with all my education, feeling that way. Then the man in the street who has never had an encounter with depression, who doesn't know that a psychiatrist is not, it's a doctor of the mind, and that depression is a sickness of the mind. It's a big stigma. And first and foremost, people do not want to come out to say they're feeling depressed and be sent to see a psychiatrist. Writing this book, it was very challenging because someone had said to me, if you write this book, you will not get a board appointment or a political position. And I rationalized that at this stage of my life, I have literally struggled on my own without any political appointment or a boiler. Is that something I should be worried about? I had gotten to a place where I felt I needed to defy stigma to be able to tell this story, so that if someone like me, a public figure, can come out and say, this is what I went through, and this is me bearing myself naked, talking about suicide, talking about seeing psychiatrists, not one, not two, but so many. I just feel we can begin to start that conversation where you're speaking to someone and say, oh, yesterday I saw my psychiatrist, and nobody's flinching or saying, oh, are you mad? So I'm hoping it might take time, because social media does not even understand that. People say they're feeling suicidal, and you have people trolling them and saying very, very nasty, very mean things.
Yeah.
So it will take a while, but we have to begin to say no to the stigma, and then we have to begin to have that conversation and also humanize mental health.
You know, having read the book, it's not just about depression. And I know our discussion is majored mainly on depression. And the reason for that is because we want to help people who may be going through it. But you've told a very rich story of your family. And one of the things I found from this is that because of what you went through, your children ended up running the magazine. And the gifts that they had were brought to the fore. So that they became, maybe they were thrown in at the deep end, but they swam.
Yes.
Okay. And so there are many things in the book. Tell us a little bit about the children, and they're not children anymore, but how they contributed to being where you are today.
My son came back from California, where he'd studied film directing, and found me in the deep of depression. Because he was away, he didn't know how bad it was. And then I remember he would start every morning, we would talk about The Secret. The Secret was big then, The Secret, the book, and The Secret, the video. So he would give me some mantras, he would give me some affirmations every morning. And then one day he said to me, I'd like to come on board as general manager. So he came on board to kind of put structure in place and make the magazine less of a one-woman business. And he was there, and also my daughter came back. She joined Genevieve at 13 as a teen columnist.
So she was even a writer.
Yes, you know, so she went to England and read a mass comm, and then she came home and became editor. But most of the time, she didn't know what was going on. Most times, I'll be on admission after one suicide attempt, I'll be speaking to her, oh yes, I'm at home, and all that. But they are one other reason why I wanted to pull out of that. The thing is, we all have a reason why we want to live. But in that moment of despair, in that dungeon called depression, there is no reason to live. But they made me want to live, because also depression does not only happen to this person suffering, it happens to the whole family. Because when a mother suffers, or when a father suffers, the family tends to suffer.
As well.
So it was one of the reasons that I wanted to pull out. And then having them, knowing that the magazine was draining me, and knowing that there were people to take charge also gave me something to hope for. Not only my children, but also we have a formidable team called the G team, where I have staff who've been there for like 10 years, and they're totally dedicated and committed. So they would see me come to work, and they couldn't understand this woman that used to be happy-go-lucky suddenly coming in. I'll call a meeting, and by the time they're gathering in my office, I have this weariness of my soul. And I said, we'll do this meeting tomorrow. And then some of them will meet me as I'm entering the car. MD, you don't need to come to work. We can do this. But then when you're running a business in Nigeria, you know, you just have that sinking feeling that people cannot do it when you're not there. And I think we all need to let go sometimes and let people that we have trained continue, and also to trust them that they will not allow the ship to sink. So we had a dedicated team of people and my children as well.
Now, I don't remember whether it was you or it was your husband in the afterword
It's Sonny.
that said the church, the attitude of the church is go get deliverance. You get that demon cast out.
Yes.
What do you think about this attitude of the church?
People have asked me that, okay, I didn't talk much about my encounter with the church. It was at that stage in my life, the first place I wanted to go was not the church. But I remember one particular afternoon, the first anniversary of my brother's death, I ran to church. We woke up in the morning, we said prayers, and I felt I was good. But then I had an overwhelming suicide thought. So I ran to my church, Catholic church, and I spoke with the pastor that I hate the way I'm feeling. I think that was about the first time that I went to church. I feel there's a place for science and there's a place for religion. And I feel that doctors didn't create themselves. And if it was easy to become a doctor, we probably all have made an attempt. And I think that also, when you're ill, you see a doctor. And I do not believe that churches should mislead people into thinking that what they're going through is spiritual. I am not discountenancing the fact that some conditions require prayer, but I know that both prayer and medicine should complement each other. By all means, go to your doctor, let them pray for you. But I do not accept pastors or men of the church saying to people that if you have faith, you won't be depressed. So it's lack of faith. It's because you don't have enough faith. That's why you're depressed. Because you put me on the spot. Because then I'm questioning, do I really lack faith? So ideally, help me to see a doctor. Encourage me to see a doctor. And encourage me to pray. Pray with me.
I have seen so many cases where when people go to the doctors, this solution is like that.
Yeah.
And in my own, I believe that if I had a headache, I wouldn't start praying about it.
No.
I'd just take a Panadol.
Yes.
Because I can now use my faith without the headache to deal with other more important things.
Yes.
Yes, I think that the church has come to the place where we need to understand that Satan did not invent doctors or invent medicine, that this is God's work, and he can use that route to bring healing to people. God also still works miracles.
He does.
But you don't go after a miracle, a miracle goes after you.
Definitely. And I have that problem. Some of the people I'm seeing now talk to me that my father is a pastor, my mom is a pastor, and they say it's evil spirit. And they forbid me to talk about depression. So a child is going through depression. The parents are doctors. The parents are pastors. And they say to the child, you are not to talk about depression. Depression comes from Satan.
And I think that maybe the overriding reason is that if the child of a pastor has depression and people hear about it, they'll think, what kind of pastor is this?
Yes.
We're going to take another break now. And when we come back, I want to really know where to from here. Let's have an idea of where you're going from here.
Great.
So viewers, please stay tuned as we come back in a moment with The Heart of the Matter. Welcome back to The Heart of the Matter, where we're rounding up our discussion with Betty Irabor. And what I want to know now, Betty, is where to from here? 3 years ago, you wouldn't have imagined yourself in this studio talking about this. But here you are. Here's a new lease of life. It's the due season. So where to from here? Do we expect another magazine?
I said to someone who interviewed me yesterday that I'm going to get back everything I lost to 7 years of depression.
Okay.
And I am going to multiply that by 7, and everything that was taken from me, that was stolen from me by depression, I'm going to get it back. And this is like a new season for me. It's a moment where there's so much hope, there's so much positive energy. And I've written this book, and I'm so happy by the feedbacks I am getting. And one thing I want to make clear is that I do not want to be the poster girl for depression, because I don't have the emotional capacity to do that, especially with the things I'm seeing, people writing me emails, sliding into my DMs. Everybody looks like, is the world, are people happy at all? Will we ever be happy again? Have we lost the ability to laugh, to be happy? It's something that really bothers me. Right now, I do not want to take on that advocacy of activist duty. I just want to be. I've written this first book, and my husband said to me, when are you writing the second book? You should be writing the second book.
Totally different subject.
Yes, totally different subject. And I said, I'll take my time. But I think I'm going to go into something fashion. Okay. Yes, and I'm just going to take each day at a time. As it comes. I'm going to enjoy this season of my life. It's a new day. Morning has broken. And I am very grateful for a second chance, another opportunity to live my life the way I should have. And I don't take that for granted.
But you are there for people who just want to be able to see you, not as a poster girl now for depression, but to be able to know that, look, if she could beat this, I can beat it too.
Yes.
Okay.
I've started that. As I said, I had someone call me, and she said she was suicidal. And I was conversing with her on Instagram, and she said, please pick up to talk to me. Just pick up to talk to me. And I didn't want to do that because I have come out of depression, but I tend to be emotional when people have issues. And I haven't come around to knowing how to deal with that. And eventually I said she should come to the office. She came to the office and we spoke. And it's a messy situation. Even when I saw her, I felt it's a messy situation. But she had bought the book and she could relate with some of the medications that were making her suicidal. She was on amitriptyline. And I said, look, I am not going to, she asked if she should drop it. I said, no, you have to go back and see your therapist. And if you're not getting value from this therapist, then there are some therapists I'm going to be working with. I'm going to put something out there for therapists to volunteer. Okay. So that together, people can call up a number and say, this is how I'm feeling. I know there's a suicide hotline, but then how about the person on the other side of the line? Have they learned empathy? Do they know about depression? What are they going to say to you? It's okay to have depression hotlines, but do they know what to say to someone?
You need to have the right people.
You need to have the right people. So I think also it's something that we keep going back to the government, but really I just feel that people should look after themselves and people should understand what depression is and know how they can fight it and then seek help. Seek help, go to church, pray, but more importantly, see a therapist and open up. People can help you when you still hold back some things. You have to open up. But I would like to give a bit of hope to people I can. I'll just work within my own capacity, what I can take. Yes, I'll be willing to do that.
Well, it's been such a pleasure having you on the Heart of the Matter. We're really grateful for this opportunity to be able to hear from you about what you've been through, and we do respect the fact that you have done this so that people can find succor in their situation. So thank you very much for coming. We hope we'll get you back.
Anytime.
Again.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure talking to you. And I think maybe you should also consider broadcasting because you did amazingly well. Thank you.
That's what they call a photo trick. Viewers, it's been our pleasure to bring this episode to you. I'm sure that you've enjoyed watching and listening to Mrs. Irabor. We're going to put contact details for Genevieve magazine if you want to, and the book, so that you can get in touch with them and be able to get your own copy of the book. We'll be back again with another episode of The Heart Matter next week, so tune in next week. Have a wonderful week.